Totally addicted to games. Oh, wow, 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 wow.
The Gaming Lovers Podcast with Brendo and Jem.
Fascinating fact. It is episode 13. 13, my favourite number, because it makes a B, if you draw them close enough.
G'day and welcome to The Gaming Lovers, episode number 13.
13?
Mm-hmm.
That's a baker's dozen.
What?
That's actually what they're called. When you get a baker's dozen of rolls, you get 13.
I thought it was 12.
No, that's a dozen.
Oh.
A baker's dozen, they give you one extra.
So basically they're saying bakers can't count? Is that where it comes from?
Well, if
Or are
someone's...
they being generous and throwing an extra one in?
Probably, but if someone's ordered a dozen Gaming Lovers podcast, well, guess what? They're getting a gamer's dozen.
Wouldn't technically the bonus episode
Oh
we
my
did
God.
back then count as the extra one for the dozen? Anyway, welcome to the Gaming Lovers Podcast. I'm Jem.
I'm Brendo.
And we had a message come through our website, thegaminglovers.com. You can record audio messages up to 90 seconds there. And we received this voicemail from Priscilla.
Hey Brendo, hey Jem. My name's Priscilla and I'm loving the podcast, but I have to admit that I've never really gotten into a lot of games before. And I guess one of the reasons why is because I get addicted to things really quickly, and I really don't want to, have it consume my life. So I was just wondering what you would recommend for someone like me, someone who wants to join this community but doesn't want to spend my whole life indoors. Yeah, keep up the good work.
Aww,
Well, there you go. Priscilla.
thank you.
My older sister had a puppet called Priscilla. I wonder if it's the same person.
Oh dear. We're going to get to her question very, very soon in this episode of The Gaming Lovers, talking about video games that are great for those who are just getting started or good to introduce to people who maybe aren't super into video games, and video game addiction, which is kind of a touchy subject at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get there, though,
Oh.
gaming goals.
Gaming goals, time. Have you moved on from the eternal struggle of Trails of Cold Steel 2?
We covered that last week.
No, but have you moved on? You said you might consider tracking some trophies and just continuing your eternal time in that game.
No, I'm enjoying a good breather.
Yes, I figured you would be.
But I might go back and do some more trophies once I've had a bit of a palate cleanse, because, boy, that was a mammoth effort to finish that one off. So at the moment, I am actually playing a visual novel on my Vita called Period Cube. Kind of a strange name.
Something of Amadeus. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Oh, I forgot the subtitle. I've only just started it.
You just got lost on Period Cube.
It's kind of a gross name. I know it means, like, it has different connotations in other countries. Like in the States, they use period to say full stop.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't in Australia. For us, especially us females, that brings images of our time of the month. So it's kind of awkward.
Yeah, it's getting very awkward. I remember seeing that in a Sonic the Hedgehog comic, actually, where Sonic made a point and then said period. And I was like, what?
Why is he bringing that up? Yeah, I remember growing up just watching different sitcoms and stuff, and they would say that, and it would be really jarring until you kind of figured out that that's not what they meant. Like, you kind of get from context what they're actually referring to. So you gotta love just those slight differences in culture. It's not a huge thing, but it's enough to cause confusion.
Yeah, and full stop cube wouldn't have sounded quite as cool.
No, but period usually talks to, a lot of the time, like a period of time.
Ah.
So I have a feeling it has to do with that. And it's basically a poor man's Sword Art Online so far, but visual novel style. So it's been very interesting. I've been sucked into a video game. Seems to happen a lot these days. And if I die in the game, I die. So I'm very thankful that I'm not the actual protagonist in this game, because that would suck.
That's like a setting that primary school Brendo would have just loved. I wished that I could be in so many of the games that I played back then. But every time it happens in media these days, there's the threat of death looming
Yes.
over your head.
Well, I guess if you don't have that, then there's no consequences. You can basically live and play as you choose, and people can die and there's no consequences. So they have to have consequences to make it, I guess, move the story forward and have that threat of danger.
There's a lot of consequences.
Well, I mean, you would just throw yourself into battle if you never died. Like, what would be you wouldn't worry necessarily. I mean, if you lost your items, not as big a deal as losing your real life. But anyway, sidetrack. So that's what I've been doing. I've been actually reading a physical book as well this week, which I finally finished. So now I'm delving into this visual novel and might add something else to that, but we'll figure that out at the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been up to?
Well, I fulfilled my promise on Friday evening, Australian time. I played through the awesome adventures of Captain Spirit.
Nice work.
And speaking of primary school Brendo, boy, playing with virtual action figures and putting on voices and things like that, that is how I grew up. That's how I expressed my imagination. So I didn't expect it to make me just sort of float back into,
Childhood.
2 decades ago or more and just relive that sort of playful imagination. But
does a good
I got
job
into
of
it.
that.
It was fun.
There are like little moments like with the bruises on his arm and other moments where I'm just like, I want to go into this TV and hug this kid so bad. I'm like, this overly protective part of me. So that's where it always hit me in the gutter. It's beautiful and it's free. Again, I think we've said this so many times. Every time it gets brought up on this podcast, we're like, go play it. There's no excuse not to, unless you can't physically do it because you don't have the right console. But if you can...
There's no excuse, old woman on the corner of the street. Go and play it.
If you can, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Just download it and experience it. It's beautiful. So
It doesn't take too long either. My playtime was about an hour and a half.
yeah.
And I was taking my time and meandering about and interacting with a whole bunch of stuff. And I didn't even achieve everything that there is to do in it because there's like a whole bunch of mini objectives for Captain Spirit to take care of. All the baddies to slay. Like Snowmancer.
Yeah. Which is pretty common for the Life is Strange games. Like I know when I played through it the first time, I missed so many little things that you can do. Like you have the options, and I think I maybe I panicked because I forgot that I could just rewind time in that game. So if I got caught doing something, just rewind time. It didn't happen. But I played as though I couldn't rewind time, and so I'd be like, oh no, I've got to hurry over here.
A lot of
so
stress.
I'll forget about that when I really could have taken my time and done everything. So it's funny how sometimes games can make us feel like we've got to keep moving forward when we really don't have to.
Well,
that
even
false sense of...
right at the start of Captain Spirit, I won't claim it to be a spoiler because it's in like the first minute. The kid's father's calling for him to come to breakfast. And I'm like, I want to keep exploring this bedroom. I haven't finished looking at everything yet. You still get that pressure of, I got to get out there or I'm going to get in trouble.
Exactly. Oh, the story's going to burst in. I'm not going to get everything done kind of moment. So certain games, once I've replayed them enough times, I don't panic anymore because I know I'm like, nah, it's all good. I can take my sweet time. But the first playthrough is always so stressful. Sometimes I'm like, oh no, I better do what they're telling me to.
I think I put too much stress on myself the first time I play through a game because that's my canonical playthrough. This is the playthrough. Everything else is just fluff on top. If I replay a game for fun or for trophies or achievements, that doesn't matter. But my first playthrough, this is sacred. This is precious.
Yeah. Have you got any other games on your list for your gaming goals that you've touched this week, or has it just been Captain Spirit?
No. In other news, I did end up replaying the game that I could not put down. I ran another entire run through of Prey, played it completely differently.
You did a whole playthrough?
Well, I knew where I was going. I didn't focus on all the side quests. I single-handedly killed every living human on the space station.
Yep.
That was kind of fun.
Okay, I'm nervous
and
now.
I actually ended up getting all the achievements in the base game because, again, that's a sign that I loved my time with Prey.
There you go. I'm not one to judge people replaying games, so
definitely
they'll be
not.
a bit critical of me.
Now, I was tempted to jump straight into the DLC Moon Crash, which does play differently to Prey. It's more arcadey, sort of roguelite style. It's sort of procedurally generated, sort of mixes it up every time you play. That is still full price at the moment. I have plenty of games that have already been purchased, so I figured I should get them off the checklist first.
Yes.
And I have dived back into Yakuza 4, and oh boy, straight back in. Big key story points. I'm well and truly back in love with that series.
It doesn't take much, does it?
Not at all.
All right. Well, we'll be back with more gaming goals once we get through. We've kind of got a split topic for episode 13 of the Gaming Lovers podcast, thanks to Priscilla's question.
Hey Brendo, hey Jem. My name's Priscilla and I'm loving the podcast, but I have to admit that I've never really gotten into a lot of games before. And I guess one of the reasons why is because I get addicted to things really quickly. And I really don't want to, have it consume my life. So I was just wondering what you would recommend for someone like me, someone who wants to join this community but doesn't want to spend my whole life indoors. Yeah, keep up the good work.
So she was talking about how she's kind of not really a big gamer, and so I think she sounds kind of tentative about starting up any games, right? But mostly because she's worried she's going to get addicted and become a hermit.
Well, that is the danger with any new hobby that you pick up.
Absolutely. For me, because I love reading, and the last book that I've read, like an actual physical paper book, and not a visual
What
novel.
is that these days?
It's amazing how heavy they are. I forgot how heavy they can get. And I'm staying up and I'm like, it's 2 a.m. and I'm still reading and my wrist is aching. But I get really sucked in. If it's a good story, I will not want to put it down, and I will forget to eat. I will forget to do anything. And I will literally sit in the same spot for like hours. And then you're like, you're still there. And I'm like, oh, I am. Whoops. So for me, there's that danger of getting addicted and getting sucked into something regardless of what form it takes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you've just got to be aware of what your personality type is. And if you know that you kind of get sucked into things, to put things in place to protect you. So we're going to dig a little deeper into all of that. But first up, I was thinking it would be great to cover some games for beginners, things that are good to kind of get your feet wet and, introduce you into gaming, especially if you're kind of intimidated by a lot of really big games.
Dark Souls. There you go, Priscilla.
Say ones that have nice easy modes, ones that have good tutorials or are very easy to pick up and just play. So we've kind of got a rough list here.
Well, before we get into that, Jem, what started you in the gaming world?
My first gaming experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like solo?
What's the earliest game? What was your gateway into gaming?
The Nintendo 64, I guess, in a serious sense.
Mm-hmm.
We had, I think I've mentioned it a few times before, that we've had those little... They weren't Game Boys. They were like...
Game & Watches.
Game & Watches. And we had those, and then I had a Game Boy, or I had someone else's Game Boy that we borrowed, like the grey brick that had a couple of games that we could play.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally got a Game Boy Color.
All right, hit rewind. What was on the Game Boy? What were you playing on the Game Boy?
Like Tetris.
That was it?
Tetris is the main one I can remember. I can remember more of what I had on my Game Boy Color.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was mine. I asked for that. Everything else did not belong to me, so it didn't really feel like... It felt more like borrowing something as opposed to really being mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I was just curious as to... So it was more puzzles?
Yeah, a
sort of
lot of
games?
puzzle things. That's what my mum liked, so that's what she made me play. But I love Tetris. I love a lot of puzzle games and stuff. And I still play them today. So... but I remember some of my first proper games. I had Pokemon Yellow.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I guess, my first RPG, really.
Yep.
And then I lent that and never got it back. And then I had a lot of Pokemon games. I had Pokemon Pinball. And there was another Pokemon puzzle game, which kind of like Tetris, but not with different coloured bricks.
It was Pokemon Puzzle Challenge. It had
Yes!
like the little coloured blocks.
My mum got that for free. She went to Nintendo's headquarters. There's one here in Melbourne, Scoresby. And it's not like a place where they design it. It's more marketing and such. But
Distribution.
Yeah. And she went in there, I don't know what the heck for, but she got it for free. I'm like, what? So, awesome.
Well, that's the story she's sticking to. Well, I was just asking that because It would be like, think about if someone says, hey, I haven't really read a novel before.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk them into a bookshop and you wouldn't just go,
Here, War and Peace by
Yeah.
Tolstoy.
You
You'll
know,
love it.
with any type of media, if you're getting fresh into it, you still have to align it with your
Tastes.
tastes.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And your skill level.
So you found a gateway in with more puzzle style of games, and you also love to play on your mobile
Mhm.
games that just entertain you mindlessly with puzzles while you got other stuff on in the background.
But truly, I don't feel like a real gamer until we had our 64. So when that got introduced to us and we played, GoldenEye, Super Mario 64, as well as Mario Kart 64, like those were the things that really made me feel like a gamer because I poured a lot of time and effort into it. I became better than my cousins, which was like a point of pride. They'd come over and I would whoop them and I would be like, yeah, I'm better at you than something kind of thing. So I think that's when the whole gamer mentality really kind of kicked in. Could have been labelled one earlier, but I didn't really feel like one. I would never have called myself one until that moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's weird. We all have our areas of things that kind of feel like our gateway. What would you say was your starting point?
Well, to contrast with you, how you had puzzles that sort of captured your imagination. For someone who loves puzzles like myself, I couldn't stand them back in the day because we didn't have Tetris, but on the early Sega consoles, there was a game called Columns, which was basically one of the first Tetris clones.
Yep.
You had a column of 3 things, 3 different colours, and you had to line them up in groups of 4 or whatever to make them disappear. The usual coloured blocks, match colours, kaboom, points, yay, continue. And my sisters and my mum, they all loved that game. And I'm like, this is so boring. Where's the adventure? Where's the exploration? Where's the cool art design? Where's the, give me a button to jump, enemies to dodge, a sword to swing, gold to pick up. I'm a happy boy. So that's what I liked. Whereas, like you said, you had the puzzles, then you had like the party-style games, Mario Kart, that sort of thing that was giving you that sort of competitive nature and community, a small group to keep playing with.
Yeah.
So it all depends on what style of games you want. If you are someone who likes reading, Jem and I both love visual novels because you get the aspect of a great, usually interactive story. You can steer the ship. You can choose how relationships go. You can solve mysteries or just focus on the hunks and honeys if that's what you're interested in. Yeah, and like I said, if you do enjoy a good book and you like to read a chapter before bed or something, just something that takes 10, 15 minutes of your day just to wind down, a game series that I adore, Ace Attorney, where you play as a hapless lawyer and have to try to figure out what's going on. That's basically part just story, basically a novel, and part investigation and trying to piece the pieces together, logic puzzles. Someone says something that you know is explicitly wrong in this situation. You have the evidence to back it up. You've got to choose the evidence. And that's a good game that you can play in small bursts because one person takes the witness stand and then you deal with them for about 10, 15 minutes and then the story moves on to someone else. And those are good points to save your game, suspend it, pop it away and come back to it the next day.
Yeah. And if you're stuck on something, it gives you a chance to mull it over as well. I think that's part of why we liked games like 999. They're kind of a mix of visual novel and, these puzzles that you have to unravel. So really good brain teasers, sometimes unbelievably hard. There's some are really easy and some are like, poof. So, but if you're good at puzzles and brain teasers, then those would be like right up your alley. And incredible stories. So let's break it down into a couple of different styles of games for things that we would recommend for those who are kind of just getting their feet wet and don't want to jump right into the deep end of video games.
Dark Souls 2.
Avoid.
No. I'll just work my way out through them. It's fine.
All right, let's start up with short story-based games. So we've already touched on a little bit of visual novels, which can fall under this category, depending on the visual novel, though. Some of them can go for ages. Depends, because it's like reading a book. Some books are short, some books are long, and some visual novels give you the option to fast forward, which is not recommended. But hey, some people can't be bothered. I would say games like Uncharted, they give you the option now, especially on the reboots, to play on like super easy modes, where it's basically like any time you have to fight or shoot, it's simplified so you can take a ton of damage and you don't have to really aim too hard. It's a great way to introduce you to a shooter style with also incredible story.
Well, not to throw you under the bus, dear,
Oh, really?
but a lot of games, when I was like, hey, would you like to try this game? And you're like, does it have easy difficulty? And I'm like, well, there's no real difficulty levels. It's sort of as it is. And you're like, oh, I don't like it. You know, if you are someone who's either just fresh on the gaming bandwagon, you're probably not going to have the reactions and the coordination to work 2 sticks, 12 buttons.
Yeah, you got to get used to the controllers.
And some people just don't like that pressure over them of the extra difficulty. Some people like the pressure. Some people thrive with the pressure.
Yes.
I've mentioned before my run on Insanity difficulty. Mass Effect 2 was one of my favourite video game experiences in my life.
Brag.
But that was tough as nails.
Yes.
And some people, if a game starts to just wear them down, they bail. And
Are you describing me right now?
Yeah, a little bit. And more games these days are adding easier and easier difficulty levels. You've always basically had easy, medium, and hard. And now they're adding one beneath easy.
Cinematic or whatever.
Story.
Yeah, story mode.
Story difficulty.
There you go.
Basically, if you die in that, you're probably just standing still and you're just letting it happen.
And not healing yourself. Yes. Horizon Zero Dawn has that as an option. The Uncharted, the reboots added that. I believe, though, the cost of that, at least with the trilogy when they put it in a pack together, was that you could not get any trophies if you played on the easiest of easy levels. I think they were kind of punishing you for that.
Yeah, but again, that's like, if you want to chase trophies, you sort of have to earn them.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. Prey has a story difficulty, which is why I blew through that second playthrough so quickly, because I was just an invincible tank.
And you knew where everything was. That always helps. But I always like to, if I'm nervous about a game, I like to play on easy first time. And once I get my skill levels up and I'm familiar with it, then I might go back and play it on a harder difficulty. But first time round, I'm like, nah, I don't care. I'll be a filthy casual, which is what the internet likes to refer to people like me as. Thanks, internet.
Yeah, but you get extra additions like a degree of auto-aiming, you take less damage, you deal more damage, there's more health packs around, things like that. Just help to ease you into the experience.
Absolutely.
And for sure, that would be a incredible boon to somebody who is just starting off in gaming. And you said story-based games like Uncharted. If you're worried about becoming addicted to games, if you have a game that's telling a story, it will have a definitive beginning, middle, and end. And once you end, then you can decide what to do next.
Yes.
And whether that means take a break for a month because you absorbed this game into your very being completely, and you think it's detrimental to your experience of living,
to your health,
then you can move on and maybe try a different hobby like chess. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I have no influence on anyone's mental health.
No.
But
neither of us we're not qualified to give medical advice or advice about what is healthy in that sense. We're just giving you, like, it's kind of like a friend saying, hey, know your limits, know where you have weaknesses, and if you feel yourself skipping meals is a good sign, or staying up too late, playing long hours and not taking proper breaks that are healthy for you. You can't be staring at a TV screen or your phone or anything for hours on end without taking a break and resting your eyes and your brain. Things like that are good to keep in mind if you ever feel like, have I been playing for too much? If you're asking yourself that question, the answer is usually yes.
Usually.
Yes. So the good thing about story games, especially short ones like Uncharted, like any of the Telltale games, is that they are short playthroughs. They will end. If you want to play through again, to maybe make some slightly different choices in ones that you can, or to mop up trophies, then that's great. But at least you know that the game will end and it's not going to be this never-ending thing like Skyrim. So
Yeah, exactly. Where that's just an open world and you can play as long as you want, basically.
Basically, I mean, a great game to take if you got stranded on an island. But if you don't want to get addicted to games, probably best to avoid games like Skyrim, which are very easy to get lost in,
An
especially
island
side quests.
with a TV and a PowerPoint.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
all the essentials.
Well, if you get sick of the island, you can email someone to come pick you up.
That would help. Again, there's that much of a wide variety of games. There's genres for every taste and things like that. So maybe if you have certain favourite movie styles that you like, maybe that'll help direct you into what style of games you might like. If you do like Indiana Jones and that sort of adventure stuff, you will love Uncharted.
Yeah.
If you prefer something darker and with like a dystopian future, The Last of Us would be fantastic because that, again, tells a great story.
There's nothing like a good horror game to really scare you off playing games for a while.
You call it horror. I don't consider that to be a horror game.
I wasn't saying that was. I'm just saying in general there are a lot of horror games out there that could ruin your lifestyle in the sense that you won't be able to sleep.
Yeah, if you want something light and fluffy to play, maybe stay away from Outlast
Or PT.
or any of those Amnesia, The Dark Descent and things like that.
Yep.
Off the table.
All right, let's think of things that are light and fluffy. Party games. Some of our favourite games are party games because we love to have our friends over. And the great thing about party games is you really only play them for as long as you have your friends over or your family over to play together.
Mm-hmm.
So you're never going to be playing them for a huge long amount of time unless you're trying to marathon, but that's very rare. Usually people get sick of playing a certain mini game over and over again, so there will always be variety. You will keep mixing it up. Things from Mario Party and Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, Jackbox, Gang Beasts, etc., etc. There's so many great party games out there these days that you can gather together. A great way to build up your skills for other games too, because a lot of the skills that are applied in those mini games will work for bigger games if you're ever trying to feel a bit more confident in a single or solo run.
Well, we covered a lot about party games back in the archives. You can track down that episode.
Episode 2.
And in particular, we did put a bit of praise onto Jackbox for beginners because you use your own mobile phone as your device. There's
Yes.
no complicated joysticks, no triggers, no buttons, no, triangle button. Where's this triangle button? Let me have a look at this. Where's my glasses? I need my glasses. Like when my dad's trying to play something on a controller he's not
Yeah.
familiar with, he has to look at it and go, hang on. That's what colour's that one? Hang on. No, not quite.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot easier if you are familiar. And what are people more familiar with these days than their smartphone? They're in
Exactly.
their hands for 20 hours a day.
Absolutely. And with Jackbox, you have a lot of games that are kind of loosely based off board games that you're already pretty familiar with. A lot of trivia games. Quiplash is a lot of fun, just coming up with silly one-liners. If you've got a quick wit, that is always a ton of fun to play with a big group of people. Then Fibbage is kind of based off Boulder Dash, which I don't know if other people have played that, but it's basically seeing if you're a good liar. So there's a ton of fun
creative
games.
with your imagination.
Stretching the truth, maybe. Although if you can figure out the correct answer of the truth, then you can use that to your advantage too. But anyway, we love that one and we've talked that one up to death, I think. So we would always recommend that, especially when we have friends over that aren't gamers. That's our go-to game. So I think that says a lot for a good place to start.
Absolutely.
But you do need a couple of people to play that one. You can't really play that on your own, sadly. I know.
Yeah, the good thing about playing with other people is that you're basically fulfilling two duties in life. You get to enjoy a hobby and you actually get to bond with other humans, which is always important.
Yes. A lot of people think that gaming is antisocial. They see a lot of kids on their DSs or something or on their phones, their heads down and not seeing the world around them. A lot of these party games force people to interact, to, throw some trash talk to each other and have a lot of fun. If you play a game that's on PlayStation, that's you, where you actually take selfies and stuff. It's so much fun. It's very interactive and it gets everybody moving as well in the room and the space. So things like that, it kind of qualifies as not just gaming, but family and friend bonding time.
Yes, and when I don't want to sacrifice my gaming to make time for family and friends, it's the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. It's become almost like a Christmas tradition, I think, in our household to get those games out because we're like, okay, we're itching to play video games. We've been given a ton of them for Christmas, but we're not allowed to touch them. Let's play something else. Jackbox, where are you?
Another key thing like that, like I just, it's almost like I planned this, but I really didn't. How I said you can sort of save time by, gaming with friends, and that way you're still catching up with friends, but you still get to enjoy some games. Another thing, portable gaming for me is a big one. I, for the most part, well, maybe not so much now, but back when I used to catch the train to work, I would probably get more hours in playing portable games
than anything else.
Than I would at home playing games on an actual console. Because the best thing about handheld consoles these days is they all can just be suspended. So you don't have to save your game, quit the menu, exit the thing, turn it off, and then when you turn it on next time, turn it on, load your game, and it's back 20 minutes from where you were, and you're like, ah. Now you can just, something's come up, okay, pause, into the pocket. 2 hours later on your lunch break, I'll just play for another 10 minutes, and there we go, I've done that. All right, cool, objective complete, back in the pocket.
And with the Nintendo Switch now, you've got, dare I say, some slightly better caliber games. A lot of the time, the DS and the Vita have been relegated to the... I don't want to say, we love playing portable games, but they never seem to get the best games on there, like the big blockbuster names and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's
of
always
course.
like a watered down version if they do anything to do with that, unless it's an exclusive from Japan.
Yeah, but they, handheld consoles have always had their supreme games on them that were designed for them.
Yes.
But, yeah, when it comes to ports, they were always, the port of Borderlands 2, for example, on the Vita was absolute trash. But that gap has certainly closed because now you have basically a home console that is portable in the Switch, and it's surprisingly portable if you carry a bag around, you can slide it there no problem.
Absolutely. It's almost the same size as some mobile phones these days when you take the little Joy-Cons off. Oh, it's kind of funny.
The Switch is probably a good one because it does have so many games that are targeted for, this is going to sound condescending, but for younger audiences.
Yes.
Super Mario Odyssey, for example, you can enter a world and, you might have 3 moons already gotten in that world and there's still 20 to go. And you can play as long as you want. And you could explore and go, all right, I'll grab this one and then I'll turn it off for now. Or you can play for an hour and try to find them all. It's sort of open-ended, but it's not too open-ended.
Yeah.
And the controllers, are relatively simple because the game's targeted for families and stuff like that. So these all help.
Absolutely.
We have too much advice to give here.
I think the beautiful thing is that no matter what your taste is, you will find something to play. And I think we could put people that we know, regardless of age, and we could find something for them to play, as long as they're willing to actually sit down and pay attention. The thing I have a lot of issues with friends that don't game is that when we try to introduce them to something, when they ask, or if they're, bothered enough to sit down for us, is that they'll sit and within 5 minutes they'll be like, ugh, I can't be bothered, or they'll be skipping text or wanting to skip cutscenes.
This game isn't engaging me. Well, that's because you've just skipped the story.
Yes. I had a friend who is introduced to one of my favourite games and she just blew past the first 20 minutes by just holding down the button that let you skip all the text. And then she's like, I don't get this game. And I was like, I'm going to hurt you. So it's difficult.
I've never seen your eyes narrow so much before.
But, it's frustrating because you want to introduce them to things that you love, but then if people don't put in the effort or at least pay attention, then how do they know they're going to love it if they're just kind of like, oh, this is boring, I don't get it. That reminds me of last week's episode.
You're listening to the Gaming Lovers Podcast. Want to join the conversation? Visit thegaminglovers.com. Record your comment or question by clicking on the button on the right-hand side, and you could be featured in the next podcast.
So we've covered a few games that are good for beginners and would be good to ease you into gaming, and we could probably put together a more comprehensive list specifically for you, Priscilla, if you want it. So feel free to send us a message and we can email you back. But I feel like part of what you're worried about is more the addiction side of things, which has become a big issue lately. A lot of people are maybe a little salty or sensitive in regards to this topic because it was recently announced that video game addiction was an official thing.
Yeah, it was always considered one of those silly things. Oh, those gamers, they're just addicted to their games. But, you know, my parents probably thought I was addicted to our consoles growing up when I would beg and plead to play for 15 minutes after school. You know, that's not an addiction. That's just I would like to. And if you say no, then I'll probably have a little sook. But, you know, it's not a compulsion.
Yes. And to be fair, there are definitely gamers out there that are addicted to certain games. You hear in the news of people that take it too far, that have literally died at their keyboards because they didn't take care of themselves, they didn't eat, they didn't drink, they didn't sleep, didn't take bathroom breaks, things like that, and then would die because they didn't want to stop playing their game. And that obviously is very extreme, but that's kind of a super rare instance, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's not the standard that a lot of gamers have. Most gamers, especially ones that we know, have normal lives.
Yeah.
You know, they work, they have kids. They are kids and go to school. So, like, the stereotype that people seem to build up in their head is the one that they see on TV, unfortunately, that caricature of a fat guy from South Park sitting there with chiseled dust all over his face and looks like he could use 10 million showers. And that's really not the reality. But we don't want to avoid this topic because it is important to have good gaming health and just health in general. I think a lot of the tips could apply to any hobby, not just video games.
Yeah, well, that's why it is tricky because it is, again, such a broad scope of media that people can get addicted to anything. You just consumed that book that you've read recently like there was no tomorrow. Like, absolutely. It was something that captured your imagination, and you don't particularly have an addictive personality, but it absorbed you into it. And if that was your experience every day, I might have to pull you up and say, all right, ease off there, Tiger. But it is tricky because games can and often do take up a large percentage of one's time if you invest in it. But again, it's no different to any other media. It's just gaming involves more of your mind, I suppose, than simply sitting down and watching a TV show or watching a movie, because you're just a passive observer of that movie. You might be thinking about the plot. You might be thinking about, oh, this character's pretty cool. I wonder where I can get a cape like that.
Yeah.
But with a game, you're actively controlling, you're actively making decisions. Oh, I'll go to this town and then I'll head right down this path and see what's around this next corner. So it as far as, you know, time investments, you know, movies, 2.5 hours and you're done?
Possibly.
Netflix series, again, you know, they don't go forever unless you're starting a Doctor Who experience. Who knows how long that'll take you?
Doctor Who knows. Sorry. You opened that up.
But video games can range from, you know, games you can beat in 15 minutes to games that you can beat in 15 years?
Yes. And especially, I think the reason games like World of Warcraft are constantly in that conversation is the world that they create. People are basically creating a second version of themselves in a fantasy world where they can live out a life where maybe they can make choices where they feel like they're in more control and things are going better for them in this virtual world than in real life. And it's easy to lose time there because you've got to spend time grinding, building up your level, getting your gold, all these things. The longer you spend in there, the higher level you get. And there's always new, like, upgrades and new patches and new levels and areas being opened up really regularly. It's like The Sims. Like, they just keep dropping more and more content to keep people in the game.
Of course.
So it's so easy to see why that's why people get lost in those games. And, like, for me, it's easy for me to get lost in things like Dragon Age and that, because it's I can, again, create a character that I like and pretend I'm stepping into that world. And there have been times, when life kind of sucks, when I really want to spend all day in this game and not in the real world, And it takes sometimes a little bit of coaxing or a hard reminder of, hey, I have a real life and I need to stop and put it down and remember where my priorities are, Yeah. But if you don't have people in your life that can kind of drag you out, it can be dangerous.
Well, to get real for a second, way back in 2004-ish, probably late 2004, maybe early 2005, I had failed out of TAFE. I was unemployed and my parents had split fairly recently. So I was in quite a bad headspace, and I got 100% into The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Now, for about a span of about 6 months, all I basically did was wake up, play Morrowind, and then go back to bed. And that was exactly what you were saying. It was an escape. It was the entire open world to explore, and I could, feel like I was achieving something in that world, even though it was simply programming in ones and zeros. It still felt like an accomplishment. And yeah, I have felt that compulsion to stay in that fantasy world.
Yeah.
Now, that was only a small pocket of my life. And, there are people, I'm not saying that video games are completely innocent and that, it's all just, propaganda against video games. Video games are great and perfect for everyone. With the wrong situation, the wrong personality, that can always be a recipe for disaster with lots of different things. People try to find escape from reality in many different ways, and escape from their hurts and their feelings, and try to numb and anesthetize themselves. And gaming can be used in that way. But on the whole, it's not usually going to do that for everyone.
No, not at all. I think if you look at it like every other form of entertainment, from books, there's a lot of people that get addicted to Netflix and will binge watch an unhealthy amount. Why are you pointing at me? I save the unhealthy amount for when I'm feeling unhealthy, as in, I have a cold. That sounded really fake. But also things like gambling. And because there is that line now that video games has kind of crossed, where there is gambling essentially entered into the factor, that they take the video game addiction a lot more seriously, because if people are addicted to one video game that requires or kind of nudges people towards spending money so that they can level up faster and stuff, then that's when it becomes very dangerous, because they're going to blow a lot of money because they're addicted to it and they don't want to stop playing because they want to keep beating everyone, and they get, that kick, that high that they get from victory. And so they'll put more and more money into it and more time into it, and it can become a very self-destructive habit if it's not curbed, And that's where, like any other addiction, you need things in place and to know when to stop and where the boundaries should be to kind of protect yourself. So...
yeah, if you're in a situation where, you get an offer from friends, hey, we'll catch up on Friday night, and you're like, nah, I'm going to play my game, and, they can take second place. That's usually a warning sign that things are starting to go awry. If you're starting to shirk responsibilities, push away from the people who you are close to.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's the exact thing that you should be pursuing to keep your life in balance. There's nothing better, no matter what the addiction, is connecting with other people just on a human level. Going to enjoy a cup of coffee with a friend or things like that.
Yep.
Just getting out of the house, communicating with someone, bonding with someone, and that is always beneficial.
That's why, if you play online in multiplayer, if you've got friends in the gaming community and ones that live nearby, it might be worth having a bunch of you get together and play or just talk about the game in real life. So that way you have an excuse to get out of the house, but you're still meeting with like-minded people, and do, have healthy things, have a meal together and gather together. At least you're already friends, and it gives you a reason to get showered and to make sure that you're out and get some sunshine. The danger, I think, of a lot of modern hobbies is that we're indoors a lot, and sunshine is good for the soul. It helps fight depression. It's clinically proven that being in the vitamin D rays is good for the soul, and it makes people happier. I'm not sure how that chemically works, but it does. So if you neglect that and you spend a lot of time indoors, and if you are struggling with depression and hiding from whatever it is that's grieving you through video games, then hiding away inside is probably just going to make it worse, unfortunately. So find an excuse, a way to get outside and get active a little bit, even if it's just, half an hour a day, baby steps. Sometimes I force myself just to go to the supermarket so I haven't spent all day indoors because I work from home, I play at home, and unless we had regularly, if we didn't have regularly scheduled things every week, with family, with church, with all these things, I would be such a hermit. And it would be bad. So sometimes I really have to very deliberately schedule things to get out of the house, or I would go insane, more crazy than I probably already am.
Oh boy.
And Brendo's not touching that one, is he? Honestly, I think there are like different levels of addiction. And I think it's important to know where you're on that scale. Because if you're like the low end of just a game that you really love, and kind of like that book that I was reading where it's hard to put down and you just want to see it through to completion, and so you might neglect or forget about a meal every once in a while. Those are the early stages. But so long as you kind of don't let it get too extreme, then you're all good. And it's knowing where those danger lines are in your life, I think, is the key.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put barriers in place, maybe set a timer. Like if you start a game and say, okay, I've got an hour and a half and I'll do a little thing here in this game, and then once the timer goes off, I've got to stop and save.
I do that on my days off if I know there's chores I have to do, but I'm like, I don't really want to do the chores now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do, it's still, soggy out there. I don't want to do the lawn and stuff. I'll play games for a bit, but I will set a timer, and that way I know that I have to go and get, this session has a definitive end, and it is at, 4:30 p.m. or whatever it's going to tick down to. So that does help get moving.
Mm-hmm. I feel like video games kind of get a bad rap sometimes. They're an easy target, especially for the media.
Mm-hmm.
And as gamers, we feel kind of sick. We're always defending our hobby. And then we're like, it's not as bad as you keep making it out to be. We
like professional wrestling too, so boy, we cover from every angle.
We get a lot of stigma put on our hobbies, don't we? But anyway, anything has the potential to be addictive. But so long as you don't let it control your life and you find healthy ways to just have a life balance and not let it become your life, then the gaming world can be your oyster. Or maybe a less gross food cheesecake.
I was going to say, you don't even like oyster. Why would you want gaming to be your oyster?
Your gaming world can be your cheesecake.
Okay, that sounds more appealing.
Start off small, maybe allocate press maybe like an hour a day to kind of get started. That might even be a bit too much for you. You might go, whoa, an hour a day of video games? I don't even watch that much TV. Whatever you're comfortable with, a healthy amount that fits in, one that doesn't detract from any studies you might be doing or work that you have to do or time spent with family and friends. Make it fit, but don't let it overtake or destroy any other aspects of your life. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and play Ace Attorney because I recommended it. And the whole series is basically available on iOS and Android these days, so maybe that's your gateway in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to buy a dedicated console for your games.
Mm-hmm. I think you can be a lover of games and not be addicted. For us, I think you can be passionate and love it and play it regularly without it being or taking control of who you are and how your life is.
Well, that's why we're called the gaming lovers and not the gaming addicts.
Ooh, there you go. Although that would have been a cool name for a podcast.
That's pretty cool. Oh, man.
Damn it. We hope that's helped. We're always happy to chat more. If you have other questions, feel free to hit us up at thegaminglovers.com or on Facebook or Twitter. We're always happy to chat.
I would love to
tweet.
talk about games with anyone,
Yes.
as long as they're civil.
Yes.
And it's not like a comment section on a YouTube video. My goodness, that drives me nuts.
Oh, dear.
Be positive about games, people. Be positive.
Speaking of YouTube, you can always see the live streaming that Brendo did of the awesome adventures of Captain Spirit. If
Hey.
you missed it the first time.
There's an idea, Priscilla. Maybe you could just watch that and see if that's something that you would enjoy actually controlling.
Oh, there you go. There's a lot of things. Obviously, there are different streamers that have different levels of content, which may not be kid-friendly. We'll put
I
it that
don't
way.
particularly like watching a lot of streams because they are just
Full of swearing.
Yeah, you just hear the actual player themselves just talking and profanity everywhere, and you're just like, this is not enjoy. I'm trying to enjoy what you're playing, not what you're ranting about.
Yeah.
The other idea I have for Priscilla to try, Dark Souls 3.
Oh, you gotta stop. Don't take that at all. Don't touch Dark Souls, not until you're like Brendo's level of gaming. Even I don't touch that.
I haven't done it.
I do not touch that. I'm like, I enjoy playing games. I don't like being punished for playing games. Okay?
Bloodborne.
Ugh. No.
Okay.
Ugh. Okay. So, speaking of punishing yourself through gaming goals time.
All right, I'm going to put the hammer down,
Hammer time.
and maybe 1 week might not be enough, but within the next 2 weeks, I want to have beaten Yakuza 4. Completo.
Ooh, put a time limit on it. Cool,
So
cool, cool.
I'm pushing it now. But like
right.
I said, I wanted to get through that series before we hit Japan, and time's ticking away from me.
It
So
is.
I really better get a wriggle on.
Absolutely. Myself, I think I could probably at least get through one story playthrough of Period Cube. I can't stop laughing every time I think of this stupid name. Oh my goodness. And I love it. The writing in it is so cheesy as well. It's hilarious.
Well,
but anyway, sometimes that's
did
what you want.
Pick.
A bit of cheese.
Yeah. You bought it.
I did. Hey, cheesy is not always bad. Sometimes a girl could use some more dairy in her life. You know what I'm saying?
I have no idea what you're saying. What are you even talking about?
Never mind.
Is this more period talk? Because I'm completely lost.
No, don't worry. I think I mentioned it last episode, I think, about wanting to go back to Persona 5.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what you're playing, what console is Yakuza on?
Yakuza 4 is on the PS3.
Okay.
So the PS4 will be available.
Good to know. So, yeah, maybe I'll start up a New Game Plus, Persona 5, and get reacquainted with Shibuya Station and the awesome soundtrack. I love that soundtrack so much. Do, 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 do.
And you want me to sleep.
Okay. Now that this has turned into a bad karaoke podcast, we will wrap it up, I think.
If I wanted bad karaoke, I'd be playing Yakuza 4 right now.
Well, then let's go.
Kamurocho
play.
Nights.
Oi, oi, oi. I don't watch you play it very often, but I can
Every time
always
you
hear when
walk
you're
in, I'm
doing karaoke.
Doing karaoke.
Oh, it's so awkward.
Oh, boy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Gaming Lovers podcast. We hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, feel free to find us on social media and on our website, thegaminglovers.com, where you can find all the links to all of our various live streams and social media accounts and all of our previous episodes of the podcast. Until next time, bye, Inara.
Goodbye. I'm using my spooky voice because it's episode 13.
Thanks for listening to the Gaming Lovers podcast. For more episodes or to watch some live stream gaming, visit thegaminglovers.com.